Hello, I'm Paul with pseudosonic.com, and we're here to talk about the Korg Krome EX workstation. And this is actually an introductory video into the complete tutorial lesson set that's available for purchase on pseudosonic.com. So you can buy that in either disc or download format. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just understand that this isn't a series where all of them are going to be released. Those are available for purchase. And then also understand this is kind of an introductory video. It's not really a lesson video. There's going to be another video available on YouTube that kind of shows how the lessons work. So I'll take one of the actual lessons that's further down the list in the actual complete set in order to demo that. But this kind of gives you a good talking point of what the Krome EX does and how it kind of fits into the Korg lineup. So first, the Korg Krome EX is a second generation or re-release of the Korg Krome. A couple of years ago, Korg released the Krome, and it was one of Korg's first workstations that has a color touch screen that's also at a way lower price point than some of their flagship workstations, like the Korg Chrono or the Korg Kronos or the Korg Oasis, and even the Korg Triton series. Those were released in the $2,000 and up price point, and the Korg Krome was in the, I think, $1,000 price point. So it allowed the power of the and flexibility of the color touch screen to be available to people that didn't quite want to spend that much. So it really hit the market pretty well, and it's been selling very well. The only drawback to the Korg Krome compared to some of the other workstations is it doesn't have as much sounds. It's also a PCM, which stands for printed circuit board module. Anyway, it's just a kind of a fancy way or acronym for saying that it generates sounds by using pre-recorded samples that are triggered when you press the keys. And then some of these other workstations have PCM, and they also have circuitry in there that emulates analog synthesizers. So with those, you can kind of get a lot more characteristics and flexibility in the different types of sounds that you can make. But the Korg Krome gets pretty close in there. So the Korg Krome is also one of these workstations where it's got built-in sounds and also a built-in sequencer. It doesn't have a built-in sampler, so it's not like some of the other workstations like the Triton series or the Kronos. And also some of the higher-end Korg series have a feature called Krome where you can change parameters of playback of different patterns in real time. So the Krome does have patterns, it has drum patterns and arpeggio patterns, and you can change things like swing and gate and things like that, but you can't really change some of the way the note progression articulation is like you can in the ones that have the Krome functionality. So that's pretty much the only drawback to the Krome. So I see a lot of people buying this, and it's great for sound sketches, and it's pretty capable. I mean, it's the EX has an upgraded amount of sounds that are available, so that's a really good feature. So let's get started talking about some of the other details of the Korg Krome. So it does have an SD card on the back, and when you save your sounds, of course, that's going to be saved internally, but you may save sound sets that can be loaded separately. You may not want to overwrite the ones that are in there, so you may have different entire sets of sounds. Of course, these can be shared online and things like that, and you'd export those or save them and also load those through that SD card on the back. And then also you notice you have a USB port on the back, and that can be connected to a PC or a Mac, and that basically functions as your MIDI port, so you could use that to work with other software for recording. And then you also have a standard MIDI in and out. So most of the time with the standard MIDI in and out, that's where you may connect it to like an external drum machine or pad trigger type situation. You may not necessarily plug that in through the computer. Like your computer may not have like a MIDI breakout board where it has the standard MIDI connection, so you just use USB for that. All the same keyboard controls for a pedal, switch, and a damper, and then you have your outputs up there. So on the left off the screen you have a joystick that's actually lit. That's kind of cool. You have some real-time tone controls here, so you can adjust those and make changes. And then you also have a user assignable one, row of parameters there, so you can modulate your sound while you're playing it. You can also experiment in real time or while you're doing performances. And then you also have some arpeggiator controls. That's pretty standard even with some of the most simple groove machines to have some of these arpeggiator controls for gate, velocity, and swing and things like that. So then of course you have these other, I guess you could consider these modes, but not exactly. So you have a media button where you can, all the operations that have to do with saving it to the SD. Global, this is kind of like your system settings. You have some effects buttons, and then you also have these ARP and drum track buttons. Now the ARP and drum track buttons, they're not necessarily modes. When you click on those, the screen doesn't change like it does with these other buttons, but what does happen is it turns on the arpeggiator in combi or program mode, and then this one turns on the drum track. That's kind of like it's not really a drum track that you would record with. It's kind of a drum track that allows you to just audition how the combi or program that you're playing and listening to would fit into a groove. So if you kind of get a feel of if it would work for a song idea. And you can change these drum tracks, but you can't from this area right here where it says drum track. You can't go in and program an intro and then a main part for the drum and things like that. You do all that in the sequencing area or sequencing mode of the Krome. So these are kind of just real-time tools, I guess you could think of them being as such. And then of course you have your color touch screen. All these tabs you can click on. Any one of these parameters that you see you can click on and move your finger left and right, and you can adjust those in real time. And then what's cool is in sequencer mode, when you're recording, you can actually record sliders being moved in real time. So that's kind of cool. We're going to get into that in later lessons in the video set. Now over here to the right, this is kind of the navigation area. So you have increment and decrement. So anything that you're clicked on here, you could click on the particular program that's in this track, or you could click on the name that's there. So you can use the increment and decrement, basically up and down is what it's doing. And then you also have the shuttle wheel. You can scroll around with that very quickly. And then the two buttons under here, you have an exit and a page. So if you notice at the top here it says P0. If you click page, you can go to other pages, P1 through P9. So in these pages, there's actually sub-menus and different screen displays. So if we click on P7 Arpeggio drum track, you can see it's totally different than the P0 page, which is the play page, basically. And we'll get into that in later videos. For typing out where you want to go, so right now it's 001. If I wanted to go to 100, you could just, with the name highlighted, type it out and press enter. You can jump over to anyone there. It's pretty self-explanatory. You have a right button to make changes when you save. You have a compare button that's like an undo button. And then over here in between the sequencer and the numerical keypad, you have your modes. So you got combi mode, program mode, sequence mode. Korg, ever since the N364s, way back in like before 2000, mid-90s, they had combi, program, and sequence modes. It's very straightforward. Combi and program is a one-to-many relationship. So one combi is kind of like one sound, piano for example. And then within a combi you can have 16 programs. So you may have a piano sound, a bass sound, a drum kit, a flute, synth sounds, pads, all those in there. And when you combine those into a combi, you can make splits and layers. You can have a lot of instruments playing at the same time. You could layer up a string with an EP, piano. Really splits and layers is what combis is all about. But also combis is kind of more so where you'd use the ARP and the drum track, because the ARP is going to be triggering usually a track that you're not playing with your fingers, and the drum track is also usually playing a track that has a drum kit assigned to it, and then that drum kit, its key zone range isn't set up to where you're playing keys and it's hitting the snare and things like that. The drum track is the only one triggering that particular track assignment. So that's kind of the deal with programming combis. And then you don't do any writing with program and combis. That's where you're just only playing back sounds. You do all the writing in sequence mode. So in sequence mode, it's kind of like where you do all of your writing or recording, I guess you could say. So, you know, you would assign your programs into one of these tracks. So you might assign a piano here, a bass here. Track 3 may be a organ sound, and then you record in your sections. Now, one thing that's cool too is sometimes a combi may have multiple instruments set up inside that combi, and you may want to copy that combi over into sequence. So each one of the tracks here would correspond into sequence mode. You can do that in the Krome, and this was something that was introduced in the Triton series workstations, where you could do that to kind of speed things up. So it copies over the arpeggio assignments and effects parameters and things like that. So you have banks. Banks is kind of just a way for you to organize different sets or areas of combis and programs. It's just kind of a tool where you can set up only a certain set of sounds to be in bank F, because you wanted to use that when you were working with a set list with a group of musicians that you play with or something like that. You may assign those to be in F, just to kind of make it easier for you to keep up with. Then over here you have the sequence controls. This is very similar to a tape deck. Fast forward, record, stop. And then you also have a tempo knob, so that can be adjusted. You can change the tempo, which is going to change the drum track that's in one of these combis, or if you're in song mode, it's going to change the tempo. The combis is a little weird because sometimes a combi or a program, you know, it does have that drum track that plays along with it. Right there. Cut that back off. So if you adjust the tempo, it would speed up or slow that down. But then there's also some parameters in a combi or a program where it's assigned to an LFO, and that LFO is assigned to a certain BPM. So it may cycle for every quarter note. So it may not have an arpeggio assigned, but the frequency would be changing based on the tempo. And then you also have a tap tempo button. Basically just tap out your quarter notes and it'll jump to that tempo for you. You've seen that maybe on some Roland gear before. Almost every workstation has a tap tempo feature. So this in a nutshell kind of gives you a brief overview of the Korg Krome EX, and in the later videos in the series we're going to talk about going in depth with selecting sounds and using all these other functions, including editing and recording songs.